Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me follow on that, Admiral Little. Do you have concerns about corrupt Mexican officials in terms of who we're dealing with? Is that part of our problem, that we can't trust our partners?
Our role is directly with U.S. law enforcement, so most of the information that we share will be specific to a load, and then those relationships take place between those partners and the embassy. From our observations, we've had good success with vetted crews and members of CIMAR and other Mexican organizations that we have high trust in.
Okay. Maybe Ms. McLeod or Admiral Lunde, you can address this, but my opening statement made the point that I think is very clear, is that the Chinese make these commitments on precursor chemicals at the highest levels, whether in the Trump administration or with the Biden administration, and it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. Has GAO looked at this at all? Would you agree with me that the commitments they're making, look, it's a dictatorship. If Xi Jinping wanted to go to the precursor chemical people and say, hey, shut it down or you're going to be thrown in jail, like he throws his foreign minister and defense minister and everybody else in jail, he could stop it. So what's your sense of what the Chinese are doing? And clearly they didn't abide by the agreement they had with the Trump administration, and it doesn't look like they're abiding by the agreement they have with the Biden administration. What's your assessment on that?
GAO recently added the drug crisis to our high-risk area, which is an area that we continue to look at all aspects of how to manage the issues that the nation faces. So through this work, we continue to look at the various threats that as they come through. So that's something we have work underway on.
But have you done an assessment on whether or not you think they're abiding by the agreement they did with the Biden administration?
I don't recall that we've done work on that yet.
Maybe you can take a look at that.
I can look into it.
Admiral, have you assessed that at all at your level?
Ranking Member Sullivan, that's not a specific issue that we've looked at in the Coast Guard with respect to high-level agreements between the U.S. and China. But we are, as you know, for the Arctic, close to Alaska, we're very concerned about China's activities in and around the U.S. exclusive economic zone.
Yeah.
And so we're focused on that operational activity.
Let me ask the panel as it relates to that question, or what you just raised. Just in my state, you've seen it last summer, and particularly just in the last 2 months in Alaska, we've had a joint Russian-Chinese naval task force, 7 ships last summer, or 2 summers ago in Alaska waters. Last summer, a joint Chinese naval task force, 12 ships in our waters. A joint Chinese-Russian strategic bomber task force that we, in our AIDAs 2 months ago, actually 6 weeks ago. Chinese surface vessels in our Alaska waters 4 weeks ago. And this past weekend, with this big Russian-Chinese military exercise, 3 AIDAs incursions, right, that we had to go intercept those guys in 1 week. And naval assets off the coast of Alaska, including 2 nuclear subs from Russia, 50 miles off the coast. My question is, the Coast Guard has limited assets. You have gone and shadowed these big operations. But how do you divide that up with the Navy, with Indo-PACOM? The 2 summers ago when we sent one 150-foot Coast Guard cutter to go shadow that 7-ship Russian Naval Joint Task Force off the coast of my state. I love the Coast Guard, but I let senior military officials know that was not sufficient, right? If there was a joint Russian Naval Task Force that large off the East Coast, we would have sent a carrier strike group to go greet it. So last summer when they came back, and they're going to keep coming, right? This is just, they sent a 12-ship joint naval task force. We did send 4 destroyers, P-8s, and this summer we have a destroyer and a national security cutter up in Alaska shadowing these aggressive operations. But how do you how do you divvy up the Coast Guard DoD assets up in Alaska, where there is so much activity going on with great power competition? And the one thing we do know is if we don't show up with our own force and our own weapon capability, they're going to keep doing this. Would you agree with me on that, Admiral?
Yes, Ranking Member Sullivan, thank you.
And then how do we divvy up those assets between the Coast Guard and DoD in what's becoming a really, really competitive sphere of competition in the waters and air and subsea off the coast of Alaska?
Ranking Member Sullivan, you mentioned the Coast Guard cutter Stratton's meeting presence with presidents this last weekend for the 3 Russian ships. One was a submarine. Now, the Coast Guard is unafraid out there, but we're not alone. All of our activities are fully coordinated with U.S. Northern Command, Indo-Pacific Command, and Alaska Command. And so how we decide to meet presence with presence is fully coordinated, even when the Coast Guard's operating under our own organic Coast Guard authorities. And so we remain in full coordination with them. We also coordinate with our Canadian allies on overflights of Chinese research vessels that may be operating in that area as well. And so this is a sustained operation that we have in place to make sure we meet presence with presence and demonstrate the importance of U.S. sovereignty, not only in our waters, but ensuring that these Russian Navy vessels and the PLA Navy vessels, the Chinese warships, that they are operating consistent with customary international law and that they know the U.S. is watching.
Do we need more assets up there, Coast Guard or Navy?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Sullivan. We do. As you know, we are working hard to sustain the existing assets we have, while we also look to modernize the Coast Guard fleet by recapitalizing them. Not only our national security cutters, but the new offshore patrol cutter and ensuring its presence. We have 2 of the new offshore patrol cutters, once they're built, which will be scheduled to be home ported in Kodiak, and then also along the West Coast and other areas, where they'll be able to provide that increased presence.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next I recognize Chair Cantor.